The legends surrounding King Arthur and his knights have charmed and intrigued people for centuries, and their popularity continues in the present day. As with any famous figure, however, the question arises as to whether the legend is based on any fact. There have been many suggestions over the years as to the best candidate for the historical Arthur, but the most reasonable response is that he was based on a British leader of the 5th or 6th century CE. Early sources either name Arthur as the hero of the Battle of Bowdoin Hill or describe a warrior with some similar attributes. The historian Nennius is the first writer to introduce Arthur as a great historical leader of the Britons, and later writers support this view. In the present day, Arthurian scholars like John Morris, Norris J. Lacey, and Geoffrey Ashe continue to support the claim that Arthur was historical, citing his name as one of the proofs. Arthur is the Welsh version of the Roman name Artorius. Roman names were typically given to children in the regions of Britain and Wales during the Roman occupation. The Arthurian stories originate with Welsh writers, and the name becomes more popular in the late 6th century CE, which suggests an earlier hero who inspired this practice. King Arthur. The mythological figure associated with Camelot may have been based on a 5th to 6th century British warrior who staved off invading Saxons. Little is known about the possible figure who inspired the story of King Arthur, a heroic monarch who has been a popular mythological and literary character for some time. It has been suggested that the real-life Arthur may have been a warrior officer of Roman affiliation who led a British military force against incoming Saxon forces during the 5th to 6th centuries AD. Still, Celtic monk Gildas wrote of the Saxon invasion in his work The Ruin and Conquest of Britain, citing the conflict at Bowdoin Hills, and no warrior named Arthur is mentioned. Other scholars claim that Arthur was fictional from the beginning, citing a lack of any mention of him in the earliest sources from any region. If a king as great as Arthur really lived, the argument goes, why is he not mentioned in any historical records of his supposed time? This question was asked from a fairly early point in the development of the legends, which begin with the work History of the Kings of Britain by Geoffrey of Monmouth, c. 1100, circa 1155 CE, published in 1136 CE. Although Arthur was referenced in works before Geoffrey, no one had written a comprehensive account of his reign and accomplishments prior to History of the Kings of Britain, which claimed Arthur was a great king who not only ruled Britain but conquered most of Europe and defeated Rome. Geoffrey's book was a bestseller, but there were many who doubted its historical value. Hibdon's point is still valid today. It is generally accepted that Geoffrey made up most of his history and claimed authority for it from a book, also a product of his imagination, given to him by a friend. Geoffrey claims that he is only translating this ancient book into Latin when, actually, he was creating the stories in order to give Britain an illustrious past. There is no question that the legend of Arthur begins with Geoffrey, but there was almost certainly an actual Arthur who inspired the legend. Thank you for accompanying us so far. For your support, thank you for commenting on the subscriber and how you felt about this video. Gildas records the so-called groans of the Britons, the messages sent to Rome for help and Rome's refusal. He characterizes the Saxons as savage dogs who fell upon the land and destroyed everything in their path until they were defeated by the Britons at the Battle of Bowdoin Hill, which he dates to c. 460 CE. He is the first to mention the Battle of Tintagel and the Briton victory over the Saxons, but never mentions Arthur. He instead cites Ambrosius Aurelianus as the leader who rallies the Britons following the Saxon invasion and leads them to victory in battle. Ambrosius is described as the last of the Romans, of noble birth, whose parents seem to have been killed by the Saxons. His designation as last of the Romans or alone of the Romans is a term which has been applied to many who embody the highest values and greatest virtues of ancient Roman civilization at different times in history. Ambrosius Aurelianus is presented in the first part of Gildas' work, which provides the history of Britain, as the embodiment of these virtues. Gildas chooses to exalt him as a true Christian hero in order to highlight the difference between a good leader who cares for his people and the 5 kings of his own time whom he criticizes and condemns in the second part of his work. Since Gildas is primarily concerned with the juxtaposition of sin and virtue, it is possible he embellished upon Aurelianus' character to make his point. This characterization, some claim, would later give rise to the legends surrounding Arthur. Another Welsh work citing Arthur is the elegiac poem Wygodon, commemorating those who died fighting the Angles at the Battle of Catrith 600 CE. Arthur does not appear in the poem but is alluded to in comparison with another warrior being praised. The poet writes of the courage and bravery of Groans but says he was no Arthur. If the poem could be conclusively dated to shortly after the battle, then it would be the first literary reference to the figure of Arthur. Unfortunately, the only extant manuscript dates from the 13th century CE, and many of the details in the piece are thought to be additions by later scribes. There have been many possibilities suggested as the real Arthur: Roman military leader Lucius Artorius Castus, c. 3rd century CE, the Briton king Rhyathemus, c. 470 CE, the Welsh hero Caradoc Rhydfrys, c. 6th century CE, the Saxon king Cerdic, the son of Ambrosius Aurelianus or Ambrosius himself, 5th century CE, the Scottish prince and war chief Arthur Mac Aidan of Dal Riata, 6th century CE. Even though all of these may have some qualities of the legendary Arthur, none of them have all, and some, like Castus, have almost none. Excalibur, in Arthurian legend, King Arthur's sword. As a boy, Arthur alone was able to draw the sword out of a stone in which it had been magically fixed. This account is contained in Sir Thomas Malory's 15th century prose rendering of the Arthurian legend. But another story in the same work suggests that it was given to Arthur by the Lady of the Lake, and that, when the king lay mortally wounded after his last battle, he ordered the faithful Sir Bedivere to go to the water and throw the sword into it. An arm rose to catch it, brandished Excalibur 3 times, and then disappeared. There was a famous sword in Irish legend called Caliburn, from which Excalibur is evidently derived by way of Geoffrey of Monmouth, whose Historia Regum Britanniae refers to Arthur's sword as Caliburn. Malory says that Excalibur means cut steel. Belief in Arthur's expected return to his country was kept alive in stories for many years by the people of Britain. Arthur's bones were supposedly found at Glastonbury Abbey in 1191, though this was nothing more than a fabrication designed to quell the belief that Arthur would return to expel the invading Normans. Nevertheless, Some bones were indeed interred in a black marble tomb in 1278 at the expense of Edward I.